You all can see the screen that I'm sharing, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this chapter, ecosystems, is it has some concepts, but majorly it's a factual chapter where you have to know things about ecosystem and how is it structured and how an ecosystem functions. Okay, so let's go from let's start from the basic, and you tell me that if that thing is discussed yesterday, and if it is, then I expect that you people will speak more in today's class. Yeah. Please speak more in today's class. Okay, so first of all, starting with, so tell me what did you already covered? So what do we mean by ecosystem? How do we define it? In this part was covered. If I ask you, how will you define an ecosystem? You can just define it
So
in
it
your.
is when the biotic and abiotic factors interact.
Yes, where biotic and abiotic factors interact. Correct. And to interact what? To interact, like, why do they interact? Like, is it some special place where it happens? What do you understand? What do you understand by the statement that it is, you say it is a place, or it is where biotic and abiotic components interact? So is it some special place? So suppose if I want to see an ecosystem, where should I go?
Forest.
Forest. So that's where biotic and abiotic factors interact. So what about your homes where you live? There's no ecosystem there.
There is, because we are biotic and we also interact with the biotic factors.
For example,
With other humans.
other humans are also biotic, no? Other humans are not abiotic. So if humans go and start their car is abiotic. Or we use our mobile phones, that's abiotic. So are we forming an ecosystem? So currently you are taking a class online on your laptops, on your devices. So your biotic factors interacting with the abiotic component. So will that be considered an ecosystem? So simply this definition is not enough. It's just to get 1 mark if it comes as a 1 marker question, define ecosystem. And if you write it, no teacher on this planet will deduct your mark. They will give you 1 mark because that's what NCERT says. But what you should learn is, what does it really mean? Are they just mumble jumbled words that we have to write in the exam, or do we also understand what are we studying? So tell me, forest, yes. If I ask you how in a forest, like Arpit said, so let's go to forest first. I think forest is a better place where you can understand ecosystem. So Arpit, how and where in a forest does a biotic component interacts with the abiotic component?
So the various animals interact with plants for the survival.
Plants and animals both are biotic components. Biotic means that are living. So you only told me 2 biotic components interacting among themselves. That is just population
So,
impact.
so the plants are deriving energy from the sun so that they can prepare food during the photosynthesis, and then the animals are going to plants for the soil.
Right. And to see that, you have to go to forest. So the plant on your terrace or in your balcony can't do that, right?
Yes, yes.
It can't do that. So
No,
how are your plants in the balcony are surviving without an ecosystem? So these questions won't come in your boards, but they're not insignificant. They are the most, I think these are the questions for which you are studying this chapter. So if someone asks you, what did you learn in today's class? You're going to say that, okay, we learned that a place where biotic and abiotic components interact among themselves is known as ecosystem. Great. But that's not what you learned today. You learned that Arpit believes that to see ecosystem, we have to go to forest, because forest is where plants interact with sun to do photosynthesis. So what about the plants in our balconies, on our terrace, or inside our rooms? I have 2 plants in my room, which are doing fairly good without sun coming inside my room. So what's happening there? So there are 2 ways to study science. One is to learn, second is to, yes, Arpit.
sorry, sir. I inverted my
Yeah.
mic by mistake.
Okay, so I was saying there are 2 ways to learn science. One is to just learn, one is to unlearn and question, am I learning correct? What I'm learning, does it even make sense? Or I'm just learning because I have to learn that. So as a kid, I used to learn tables by saying 2 1s are 2, 2 2s are 4, 2 3s are 6. I didn't know what it meant. So if you all are learning science that way, you won't know what it means. Okay, let's come to the terminology then. As I have already told you, stay assured, we have covered almost everything which is important for boards, and you all will do great in boards, as I can see from your answer sheets. But let's go a little beyond. If you want to pursue a career in education, you have to be a little smarter than you are currently. You are very smart, much smarter than me when I was your age. But still, eco and system. So the word eco comes from, what does the word eco comes from?
Ecology.
In ecology also, where does the word eco come from? Ecology means study of something which is called eco, right? Logy means study. What does the word eco means?
Lie. No.
What does the word bio means then?
Yeah, bio is lie.
Yeah, so what does the word eco means? Where have you heard this word eco?
Economy, ecology.
Exactly.
Eco-friendly.
Yes. Economics. What is economics? There's no logy there, so I think you can tell me what does economy means. The word eco comes from, the root word comes from interaction or relationship. Economics also is interaction. But what is interacting? Goods and services with human. So economics cannot be stable. So if you have 10 lakh rupees in your account and it stays in your account forever, that's not economics. It has to come out of your account, go to the market, you should shop something, pay taxes, go to offices, earn that money back, put it back in your account, again go to the market, shop something. You understand? So it's a constant interaction of goods and services that we study under economics. And for that, we created a unit called currency. Before currency was there was a barter system, but still there was economics in earlier civilizations. That economy also worked the same. I produce something, you produce something else. I need what you produce, you need what I produce. So we will exchange, and that exchange will depend on the worth. Suppose I am producing something which is very rare and you need it in small quantities. For example, gold jewelries or cloth, but you are producing something that I need daily. For example, crop or food, cereals. So the exchange has to happen in a way where I get more of food. You cannot give me 1 kg of wheat in return of 1 kg of gold. That doesn't make sense, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we establish an interaction, a relationship between things and services. That's economics. Ecology is the study of those interactions in biological realm. So study of interactions and relationships of organisms among themselves and between them and the environment. Now, environment can have both biotic and abiotic components. So that interaction, when it is studied, is called ecology. Now, coming to ecosystems, it means something related but slightly different. When this relationship is systematic or it is periodic or rhythmic, where if you break this rhythm, you collapse the whole ecosystem. Okay, so when you study, so ecosystem is when we understand the interaction or the relationship of biological systems among themselves and with the environment, which contains both biotic and abiotic components. And that interaction is systematic, then it's called an ecosystem. It forms a system. Okay, everything depends on everything else. Now that's the definition. But where, coming to the fundamental question, where can I find an ecosystem? You can literally find it everywhere. Everywhere where there is biotic component interacting with abiotic components, you find an ecosystem. But since we cannot study each and every ecosystem in detail, we divide ecosystems into certain various types. And these are the cliche definitions of forest, grasslands, desert, and other terrestrial ecosystems. Or you say river, pond, lake, reef barriers, or oceans, marine ecosystem, in aquatic ecosystems. So let's first write down. So in a way, if I say that ecosystem is a functional unit of nature, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So by understanding ecosystem, we are actually understanding how does nature works. How are farmers able to grow crops in their fields? So what do you think? Farmers just go, put the seed, put the fertilizers, and the crops come up? No, right? We know that there is a lot going on behind our knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Something
Yes.
called pollination is happening. So are the farmers going and pollinating each?
No, sir.
So who's pollinating?
The nature.
Yeah. Who's nature?
or insects or wind or water.
Exactly. Either the biotic or the abiotic components are pollinating our crops. So that we are not doing. So without them, if in a given region there is no pollinator, suppose we killed all the pollinators, we killed all the bees, let's say, okay, and in a region where there is no bees, some crops which are pollinated by bees, how high yielding variety seeds you use, how much water you give, howsoever much fertilizers you put in the soil, will you get a yield? Will you get even a single grain
No,
of?
sir.
No, right? So that's where ecosystem is very important. So the way the world seems it is working, it does not work that way. It's not that simple. You go and put a seed in the soil and something comes out as magic. So even wind, so our wheats, the wheat crop is pollinated by wind, which is very important. Okay. Other major crops like our pulses and all, they are pollinated by bees, insects, beetles, butterflies, even some small birds pollinate many of our important crops like jawar and corn. Okay, you must have seen these small birds pecking on corn and jawar plants, right? So basically, ecosystem is the functional unit of nature where, write down, living and, or you can write where living organisms interact among themselves and with their physical environment, and also with their physical environment. Okay, and by saying physical environment, we are including wind, water, sunlight, temperature, etc., which we have already discussed in previous chapters, how light, availability of light, wind, water, temperature, they all affect organisms and populations, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So now talking about, so as I told you, you will find ecosystems everywhere. Okay. Even the urban life, cities have their own urban ecosystem. You will find many plants, animals habituated or adapted for a city life. For example, our stray cats and stray dogs. Can you imagine our stray cats and stray dogs going and living in forests? They won't survive a single day there, correct?
Yeah.
Because they can only survive with humans, where we are not their predators, but we often feed them with something out of mercy and being good. Do you think that doves and pigeons, which are just increasing in number, they can survive in any of the natural ecosystem, like a desert or a forest?
No, sir.
Doves, yes. No, they can only survive in large numbers around us because we are feeding them. So we in cities also have created an ecosystem. But since these are not in the textbook, like standard textbook system, so we don't study them in detail. But you should know that what are we studying, right? So don't just remember the bookish definition. Take a step back. Think if what I'm learning makes sense. If forest is an ecosystem, what about New Delhi? What about my city? What about the backyard of my house? So even people who maintain their own gardens or their backyard or their lawns, they're creating a small ecosystem there, not allowing certain kind of plants to grow and allowing certain kinds of plants to grow. Yes, even a drop of water is an ecosystem because You take a drop of water from any pond, any natural water body, not the tap water because it's treated when it comes to us to drink, but any other natural source of water. If you take a drop of water and see it under microscope, you will see a plethora of organisms, zooplanktons, phytoplanktons, living there, interacting among themselves. So you will see a hydra, which will be feeding on some small crustacean, which will be feeding on some small phytoplankton, all happening in that one drop of water, which will, it will go till the level of bacteria and viruses. So does it make sense? Why are we studying this chapter?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Now, so coming to defining ecosystem. So broadly, we will divide it into two categories: terrestrial and aquatic. Okay, because classification classification always makes studying easier, right? So terrestrial and aquatic. In terrestrial, will contain all, like Arpit said very correctly. He pointed out that forest acts as an ecosystem. Even desert act as different ecosystem. Grasslands. Now, why are we calling them different? Because the kind of organisms and the kind of biotic factors you will find, and also abiotic factors that you will find in a forest, will be very different from what you find in a desert. So if you talk about any biotic factor like trees, you will find a lot of greenery in forest, but not that much in desert. Okay, you will find lots of animals in forest, but not that many animals. Especially, you will not find more birds and amphibians in deserts. You might find reptiles and mammals, but not many birds and amphibians, because it makes sense, right? If we talk about abiotic factors, then in a forest you will find more water than a desert. Even rainfall will be more than a desert. Temperature in a forest will be lower than in a desert, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And similarly, like any other ecosystem you see which is on land, they might have somewhat the other thing different from each other. So those are terrestrial ecosystems. In aquatic, again, we can divide aquatic into two, which NCERT has not done, but I think we should just keep in mind that aquatic water, there are two types of water sources on Earth. And I think you know about it, right? What are the two sources?
Fresh water.
Yes, the freshwater source and the marine water source. Now, freshwater organisms and marine water organisms naturally do not, they are exclusive in their ecosystems. So organisms which can survive in fresh water often don't survive in marine water, and so on. Okay. And we have understood why it happens in our previous chapters. Now in ecosystem, what are we? So fresh water is, for example, your pond, lakes, rivers, and marine water is your like sea, oceans. Sometimes there are very salty lakes, like big enclosed water bodies. Like, have you heard of Dead Seas?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Dead Sea is not a sea. It is just so big. Anyone know where is Dead Sea?
Yeah, it's next to Israel or in Israel.
Yes, right. Correct. And why it's called Dead Sea?
It's because it is very salinated. Like there's so much salt that like life cannot be possible there. Like
Yeah.
there's so much salt that if you go like try to swim there, you'll always float.
Yeah, it's so dense. It is just next to, I think it's the border of Jerusalem, if I'm not wrong. It is, some part is also in Jerusalem. No, not Jerusalem actually. What's the? It's at the. It's at the. You're right. It's at Israel. And what's I bad with the names, but it's there. It shares a border with Israel, and it's a very small as compared to seas, and it's actually a big lake. You know, there are bigger water bodies than that which have also been named. Like if you know about this one, um, mm, Black Sea. How many of you heard of Black Sea?
Yes, I
Yes, sir.
But is Black Sea really a sea? Or there are Caspian Sea. So you have to look at the map to figure it out. So any water body which is actually connected, even by a small, very small tributary to the main ocean, will be a sea because the water there will be salty. Okay. So your Black Sea and your Mediterranean Sea, you know, which is where the Roman Empire was. So the Roman Empire was all just around the Mediterranean Sea, where Italy is, right?
Yes.
That is actually connected to the oceans. So water there is salty, you understand that. But something like Dead Sea, which is not connected to any of the oceans, but still there is a uh, salt water, and that is not because of uh, uh, oceans. It is because of the the chemistry of the rocks which are at the bottom of this water body. And over time, because this water does not get regulated, it's not mixed with other water, it does not flows. So over time, the concentration of salt in this seas in this big lake, which is called Dead Sea, is so high that it becomes nearly impossible for a normal life to sustain there. But that does not mean there is no life. There is zero life. We say that there's no life, but still there's a lot of research going on where people have found very extreme halophile bacteria that can sustain that high salinity. Okay. So that may not be as good an ecosystem to study, but it is a marine water source. So we are just studying the most prominent and simple ones: forest, desert, grassland, pond, lake, rivers, and oceans. Okay. Now, why are we studying it? So I think certain things are clear from this introduction. But the reason we need to study ecosystems is to understand what can go wrong. Okay, first, how it is set up and what can go wrong in an ecosystem, um, which can have uh, consequences. And second is, are these consequences actually a consequence for human at all or no? Okay, so we are going to focus on importance in this chapter, and then there's this last chapter where we are going to talk about biodiversity and its conservation. So we are just moving one step up with every chapter in ecology unit. So coming from organisms, populations, now we go to ecosystem. Now, first thing we are going to discuss, I think which Jayan sir has already discussed with you, is how ecosystem is structured, right? So how is it structured? The structure and function. So the structure is closely associated to function. So we'll keep both of them together, structure and function. So what are the major components of an ecosystem, which is regardless of which ecosystem you take up, whether you take a forest, a desert, a grassland, pond, lake, what components you will always find in every ecosystem? Yes. So as you said, you have done pyramids. So you could not have done pyramids without discussing this, right? So please tell me. What are the components? People, did you discuss that yesterday?
Birth rate, death rate.
Oh, that's the characteristics of a population that you're talking about. That we have already done, right?
Oh yes, sir, sorry, I got confused.
Producer,
Yeah. Yes.
producer, primary consumer,
Yes, right. So producers,
secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer.
that's all.
Yeah.
You're right, but you're not giving the complete picture. So according to, if again, think,
Decomposers as well.
yes, right. There's decomposers are a very important component of every ecosystem. So what Fatima said, just look back and think, Fatima. So as you said, there are producers, then primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. So what are they consuming basically? The previous chain, the previous links in the chain, right? So everything
Yes,
starts
sir.
with primary producers, goes to primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. But this then has to be unlimited, right?
Yeah.
Because according to your component, whatever is going here is staying here. It's not coming back, right? So primary
Yes.
producers have to be producing unlimited resources. But that's not just possible in nature. Earth is limited, right?
Yes,
Earth
sir.
is not unlimited. So there has to be a way by which things come back from multiple levels to primary producers, which happen to be plants and all photosynthetic organisms, right? So that this can again continue. And these black lines that I have formed are your decomposers. So without decomposers in nature, we will just be able to, it's like you have a wardrobe, you start wearing clothes, howsoever big wardrobe you have. Can you have an unlimited wardrobe?
No, sir.
Howsoever rich you are, you can never have an unlimited wardrobe, technically, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you need clothes to be washed and returned back to the wardrobe. Okay, that's how it becomes a system. So very correctly told by all of you. So the components of ecosystem are the following. First component of every ecosystem is the productivity, correct? So every ecosystem should be able to produce what it needs. No one gives things to the ecosystem. You don't donate to ecosystem, right? No one donates to ecosystems. So they are self-sustained systems. So they need to produce whatever they need. That's called productivity of ecosystems. So this is first thing that we will study about. Second is decomposition. Okay, decomposition in ecosystem. Everything that is produced is used, or it remains, and then whatever is used or remains, it has to be decomposed and brought back to its elemental form, from where it can again be built by the producers. Now, between productivity and decomposition, the third component that every ecosystem contains is the flow of energy. Because no ecosystem can survive without energy flow from one level to another. Okay, you go to the market, you get vegetables, fruits, crops, meat, all those. Why do you buy those? So that you can eat and get some energy, right?
Yes, sir.
So the energy which was preserved there in that vegetable passed on to you. Yep. Okay, so that's energy flow. And associated with energy flow is something called nutrient cycling. So no nutrient stays with one component forever. For example, the CO2. Let's talk about carbon, which is present in CO2. The CO2 that we are giving out from our lungs was produced in each and every cell of ours. And where did the carbon for that CO2 came from? It came from the it came from the glucose molecule, right? That we broke or oxidated in the presence of oxygen to produce energy. Now that carbon which you ate, you got from an apple, you exhaled back through your lungs, it went into the atmosphere. And if you could somehow trace that carbon molecule that is going out of your lungs, you will see the same exact carbon molecule going back to some another plant, let's say another apple plant, potato, or pear, or any plant. That plant will take that CO2, again fix it by the process of photosynthesis to make a glucose molecule, which again will be stored in some or the other fruit. Again, someone will eat a fruit and get the same carbon molecule in the form of a glucose molecule. Do you understand? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So if you think about ecosystem in this manner, you will realize how connected everything, every living system on planet Earth is. Yes or no? Even on a molecular level. So science at a very, very advanced stage becomes philosophical, where you can actually, that's why the highest academic degree in any education field is doctorate of philosophy. It's not applicative, it's not a master's, it's not a bachelor's, it's not a specialization. It's a doctorate in philosophy, because philosophy means the purest form of knowledge that you can have. Okay. So if you think about all the iron that is present in the spinach that you need to form hemoglobin in your body, where did all that iron came from? Let's go back. Where did the iron came from? Come on, tell me. We're discussing some nutrient cycling in deep philosophy. So where did all the iron present in your hemoglobin came from? Come on,
Food
speak.
that we consume.
Food. Where did it came from in that food?
Earth.
Where did it came from in Earth? You know, where is most of your heavy elements present?
Deep in, like, below the crust of the earth.
Yes, but Earth, yes, correct, you're right. So even Earth came from somewhere, right? So if you
Yes.
go too much back, when there was no life, older than 3.3 billion years ago, when there was no life, and if you go older than the age of Earth itself, you will see that all these heavy elements which are present in the universe, which we are exploiting, which works as cofactors for biology, which works as structural structural components for enzymes and proteins in our cell, they all came from somewhere in the heart of stars, right? So each and every cell in our body is a perfect example of nutrient cycling happening in this universe. And we will study just a little fraction of it, where we will just define the boundaries of this nutrient between biotic and abiotic components on planet Earth. Okay, so cycling is only happening on planet Earth. A lot of these elements also came from outer space, which Earth. So sometimes there are. How many of you follow news? You must have read in a recent meteorite that hit the Earth. Not hit, it fell on Earth. It was very small. We call hitting. It fell on Earth, and there were two very rare kind of elements established in that which are not present on Earth. So our periodic table is incomplete because it's just with respect to what 118 elements we have on Earth. Most of which, not most, but many of which are also artificial elements produced, artificially produced by humans. So if you look at natural Earth elements, they are even less. But there can be lot more different elements in the universe which are not present on Earth. Okay. So when you read facts like it might be raining diamonds on Neptune, it's a very, very typical fact you will find in any GK book. You know that the rains on Neptune is not water vapors, it's diamonds. Carbon rains on Neptune in its most pure form. The most pure form could either be like the coal, the graphite, or diamonds. Diamond is the most pressurized form of carbon. Because Neptune is set like that in the universe. It has no life. Okay. Gold, for that matter, there can be planets, and there are planets in the universe where gold is as normal as iron is on Earth. So for some planets, iron could be a rare element, and gold, maybe half of the planet is made up of gold only. You never know. So there are planets found where the signatures for heavier metals than iron is more. Now, not going to there, that's universal nutrient cycling. We'll come to ecosystems. So talking about productivity first, where Jan sir talked about some pyramids, you said, right? So what pyramid he talked about? Okay, before going to pyramids, let me ask you a very simple question, which is a one marker question that comes in boards. The question is, what is stratification? So this is a straight question. Did you talk about this? Stratification in ecosystem? People? Yes, no.
Somebody did this in earlier classes.
In earlier classes?
Like the different layers of atmosphere, right? We did that.
No, that's stratosphere. Stratosphere, thermosphere, ionosphere. That's different. I'm not talking about stratosphere. I'm talking about stratification.
No, sir, we didn't do it yesterday.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So this question is associated with a very no, Kulsum, it's not sorting in. Yeah, it's some kind of a sorting, but I cannot understand by you saying sorting in groups. What are we sorting here? Maybe you are giving the right answer. You're giving the correct answer in an incorrect manner, maybe. Data. What data? I'm not sure. Maybe this term is also used in some kind of a data analysis thing, but I'm asking in terms of ecology, ecosystem. So it is about sorting, but not the data. It is the distribution of different organisms in an ecosystem. Okay. So stratification comes from the word strata. Strata means layers, making layers in an ecosystem. So let's take any ecosystem, for example. Anyone would like to suggest an ecosystem, and we'll see if we can understand how stratification happens. ponds. Very good, a very easy one. So in lakes and ponds, we know that this is the water. A lake has a lake bottom, or a pond has a bottom, right? And then a surface of water. So if you see, there is a vertical depth to this ecosystem. There is a vertical depth to every ecosystem, not just aquatic. So in ponds, there will be many species of fish and other kind of aquatic organisms living. There will be plants as well, aquatic plants. So some plants in a pond will just float at the surface, right? Then you will find some fish living in the upper layers, layer 1. There will be other kind of fish that will take the middle layer. They will always live in the middle layer. And there will be some kind of organisms that will live on the ocean, lake bed or the pond bed. So this vertical distribution where organisms have a place in their ecosystem and it's vertically distributed. That's called stratification. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, if you ask, this is pond and it's easier to understand there because pond has a depth. Can stratification also happen in a terrestrial ecosystem? What do you think? Do you think stratification can be seen in a terrestrial ecosystem? Yes, it can be. For example, if you look at a rainforest or any forest, in a forest, there are some trees which are huge and reach the highest and form a canopy, right?
Yes,
So they
sir.
form the roof of the forest and they are exposed to most of the sunlight. But it's not like in a forest to compete for sunlight, all trees try to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. That way, with over time, forest will keep on getting longer and longer trees, but that does not happen. And also, everyone wants to get something out of that competition. So you will see some trees are very big with canopies, but then there are some trees which are smaller with less canopies. Some are even smaller. And then there are grasses, right? Large trees, small trees, shrubs and herbs, and the grasses. Yes, this is the forest floor. So most of the sunlight will be taken by them, right? And this tree and this tree and then this grass, they're all growing in each other's shade. Can you see that? So very less light reaches the bottom of the forest floor, a very dense forest I'm talking about. So these plants, which are smaller, they don't try to grow taller to compete. What they do, they have adapted for low light conditions. So they can only flourish well in low light conditions. That's the same thing that happens with indoor plants. Again, an ecosystem, a plant which is kept inside your room, like you know about these indoor ornamental plants, money
Yes.
plant for that matter. It's one indoor ornamental plant. I have one money plant, which is my indoor plant with me, and I have named it. I've named it Omaticaya.
So why did you name it Omaticaya?
Yeah, it's actually taken from Avatar. Anyone has seen Avatar? James Cameron.
Yes, sir.
There's a clan called Omaticayans, so Omaticaya. But this is
Have you seen the second part?
yes, but this is a little different. It's Omaticaya. It's like O is for it, Mate is soil, Kaya is eat. So plants basically eat soil, right? You understand? Like in
like in Hindi.
it's in Hindi. Okay,
Okay.
just some pun, but you can see that these plants grow very well inside the house, where the only source of light. Now, no doubt these are green plants, so they are doing photosynthesis for sure. They need water, CO2, and sunlight for photosynthesis. Now, there is no sun inside my room, but there's a tube light inside my room. And through my windows, sometimes very like the outside light, which is not the direct sunlight, but scattered sunlight. Actually, every light in nature is sunlight only, right? Either it is sunlight, even the moonlight is sunlight, you know that. Moon cannot emit its own light. It is the sun's light that gets reflected from the moon and reaches the earth. So every form of light which is significant in our sky is sunlight, except for the star's light, which is twinkling. Those are starlights. All the planets that you see are sunlight, just reflects back. So the light which enters from our windows, even if it is not the direct sunlight, is sunlight only. And light has component, okay, visible. So the visible light ranges from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers, right? This is called the visible spectrum. And if you remember, I talked about, you learned about photosynthesis in higher plants in your 11th class. Remember that? People, that's where 11th class is also very important, the concept. So remember studying photosynthesis. Even if you don't remember, do you remember that it's not the whole spectrum of the visible light that plants need to do photosynthesis? They majorly do photosynthesis in two kinds of lights. One is, so it starts with violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. So from violet to red, there is a shift in this visible light. So they mostly do very good either in the blue light region or the red light region. So photosynthesis happens mostly in this blue and red light region. So even if your tube lights, they have some component of blue light, which is enough for these plants which are indoor to activate their photosynthesis reaction center and allows them to do photosynthesis. That's how these plants can do very well in very low light conditions, or even with a tube light or a bulb or just some light coming from the windows. They grow. So they behave similar to these plants which are at the bottom of the forest floor. Now again, there is a vertical stratification. Different kind of organisms have taken different layers in that ecosystem. That's called stratification. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So write down. The vertical distribution of different organisms or different species of organisms. Vertical distribution of different species of organisms which occupy different levels in an ecosystem. Sorry. In an ecosystem is called stratification. Excuse me, people. is called stratification. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Great. Now coming to the first component of ecosystem, which is productivity of ecosystem. So now you realized how basically ecosystem is structured, any ecosystem. So the first component is productivity. Now, what is this? What is productivity? What is being produced? What are the ecosystems producing and who are producing? Are humans producing something for an ecosystem?
No, only plants produce.
Exactly. So no other entity than plants, not only plants, but anything which can photosynthesize is a producer. Majorly it's plants around us, but you know that there are cyanobacteria that can photosynthesize, there are algae, and there are what do you say, other kind of organisms that do not fit in either category. For example, euglena, which we know as protists, or sometimes we study it as, so they show both the behaviors. You know, they do photosynthesis, they also do predatory, they also show predatory behaviors, which are animals characteristic. But basically anything that can fix components of nature into something useful are producers, and that can be done by photosynthetic systems. So they are called primary producers. So only primary producers produce things. Now to produce anything, we know that we need energy, right? So humans do not produce anything for the ecosystem. Nothing. Zero. We don't even produce our own food. We cook our own food. That's different from producing. Okay. Now, but to produce anything, we need energy. Now, for any ecosystem, what do you think is providing energy? Who provides energy to any ecosystem? It's the sun. Okay. So solar energy is the constant source of energy for an ecosystem. So this is how we can see, and we can join a biotic and an abiotic factor, that for any life that you see on earth, any life that is sustaining in some or the other way, it is dependent on sun. Solar energy is the constant source of energy for every ecosystem. Okay. And this solar energy is taken up by primary producers. And whatever they produce is called the primary production. The primary produce. Primary production. Now, if you see in a way, how will we define primary production? If I ask you to define primary production, what is it? what is being produced, people?
Energy.
Energy is not being produced. You're right. Everything is happening for energy.
Food.
Yes, food, right. And what is food? So there are only two things that exist in the universe broadly, going to the extreme philosophical physics. What are the two things in this universe? What are the two things in the universe?
Energy and mass.
Energy and mass. Correct, right? Because c is the speed of light. It is a constant. So the only thing is energy and mass. So Earth is a part of universe. On Earth also, there are two things, either energy or mass. And this production can also be defined in these two concepts. Either you talk in terms of energy, which will be slightly difficult to define in terms of primary production, but it can be done, or you talk in terms of mass. So the mass which is produced in the living system, it's called biomass. Okay, for example, the earth itself has a mass, but biomass will not include the mass of the rocks, the mass of the oceans, like the water, or the mass of the soil, but it will include the mass of bacteria, every living component, basically, every cell which is present. So primary production is defined as the amount of biomass, or or called organic matter. So amount of biomass or the organic matter which is produced in nature per unit area. Per unit area, per unit time. Because you also have to define time, right? And we only consider the matter that is produced through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. That is primary production. So the word primary will always be associated to photosynthesis. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But is this thing clear?
Yes, sir.
So that's primary production. So you understood, you must be appreciating that primary production is all about photosynthetic mass gain, production of starch, right?
Yes, sir.
Formation of new cells from that energy, the plants growing, the jungle growing, the grass is growing. All this is primary production. Now, let me also tell you here only how will I measure this production, or what will be the unit. So everything should have a unit by which we can measure, right? So look at the definition and tell me the unit. If I say that it's the amount of biomass or organic matter, I can also say it is the amount of energy.
Kilojoule.
Sorry?
Kilojoule.
Kilojoule is not a unit of mass or matter. It is the unit of energy. So if you are defining primary production as kilojoules, which I said in the first instant, that we are currently defining it as matter, amount of matter produced. You can also define it as amount of energy produced. Then you can use kilojoule. Okay, you understand? But first,
Yes,
with this definition, it will be it will be gram. Yes. So look at this. There is a matter, there is area, and there is time. There are three things.
Gram per meter cube per second.
Yes. Gram per meter cube. But there will be two per. So let me not write it like this. There is another way. Gram per meter cube, right? Per
Second.
sorry, I need to put it here a bit. Per second. Don't you think per second will be very, very fast? I don't think plants grow with second. Months, maybe. Primary production is very slow. Have you ever seen a fruit growing in 5-10 seconds or 1 minute?
No.
Most of these production are annual. So for our studies, we consider annual productions of a jungle, of a garden, of a lake, of the earth itself. So gram per meter square, can I write per year?
Yes, sir.
So this is the unit by which we will measure the primary production. Okay. Or as Matthew was saying, for that we have to define it as the amount of energy produced per unit area per unit time through photosynthesis again. So the other way to define it is, now yours, Matthew.
Kilojoule.
Yeah, kilocalories or kilojoules. So I'll take calories because it's the SI unit, right? Kilocalorie per meter square per year. You can say kilojoules per meter square per year. But you understand, right? This is in terms of mass. And this is the production in terms of energy. Correct? Sometimes it's difficult to do the direct conversion of mass into energy. So we just rely on mass. It's easier to make an estimate of mass. Again, both of these are estimates. We do not go and measure every tree, how much it weighs. So these are estimates. But there are two kinds of productions that you have to know about. One is called the gross primary production. And another is the net primary production. So these two terms, gross and net, anyone has heard of these two terms? Gross primary production and net primary production. What is a gross primary production, people? Gross weight, net weight. Okay, so how many of you have bought milk which comes in glass bottles? Or anything that
Yes,
comes
sir.
in glass bottles? Yes, you have brought, right?
Yes, sir.
So what is it written as if we talk about weight? Okay, so that bottle, if it is volume, it says 1 liter of milk. Okay, but you know, let's say 1 liter of water is present in a glass bottle. Now we know that 1 liter of water weighs around 980 grams standard at standard temperature. So 1 liter of water weighs 980 grams approximately. But if that 1 liter of water is present in a glass bottle, will it weigh 980 grams?
No.
It will weigh more. So they will never write the weight as net. They use a term called gross. This is also used, or this is also applied to things which come in containers. For example, oxygen cylinders or the LPG cylinders that come for household. cooking. So the weight which is written, you will find there are two kind of weights mentioned. One will be the gross weight. Gross weight will be the weight of the gas, liquefied gas which is inside, plus the weight of the cylinder. Net weight will be just the weight of gas, because that is the useful substance. You're not going to use the cylinder, you're going to use the gas inside it. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So the gross primary productivity of any ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis. So the sum total of everything that was produced, every molecule produced during photosynthesis, every cell produced due to that. So write down gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of total production of organic matter. Rate of, or you can write it as rate of production of total organic matter. Rate of production of total organic matter during photosynthesis. Okay. But we know that this everything that is produced is not useful. It cannot get passed on to the next, like from primary producers. Everything cannot get passed on to primary consumers, because primary producers, they themselves are living systems. So they will also utilize something, right? A plant also utilizes energy to survive. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
If plants do photosynthesis, plants also do respiration. Plants also maintain their damage, wear and tear. They also repair the cells and molecules, etc. in the cell. So a lot of this energy or this biomass is lost. Okay, so this organic matter is lost or is utilized by the plants in the process of respiration. And when I say respiration, I don't mean breathing. I mean the biochemical respiration, which is happening inside the cell. Okay. Where you break down glucose in the presence of oxygen to produce energy. So whatever is left after this loss during respiration is called the net primary production. And this net primary productivity is available for the consumption to the heterotrophs, to primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and so on. Is that clear, everyone? Am I audible?
Yes.
So I can't speak louder than this. Sorry. I'm so sorry, people. But I think you understand net primary production.
Yes, sir.
So write down net primary productivity is calculated by subtracting the respiration loss, from the gross primary productivity. from the gross primary productivity. So if I write a formula, net primary productivity, NPP, will be gross primary productivity minus respiratory losses. Okay. NPP is this. GPP is this. And RL is respiratory loss. Because when we are respiring, we are losing out CO2, right? And CO2 has a weight. Yes or no? People?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Great. So that's about productivity. Now, from here onwards, when this net primary productivity is, you can also write it down. The net primary productivity is available biomass. Let's define it. It is the available biomass for the consumption of heterotrophic organisms. Heterotrophs which cannot synthesize their own food, right? So in heterotrophs comes your herbivores, which are also called primary consumers, your carnivores, secondary consumers and tertiary consumers, and also your decomposers. They all depend on net primary productivity. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
And it's not like only, so I told you that I'll be telling you why we only take the production due to photosynthesis in primary production, because there is something called secondary production and tertiary production also, which you don't have to study in detail. But ecologists study this in detail, and they also have to understand the secondary production is where it is the rate of formation, just like it was happening in primary production. Here, new organic matter is produced, but by the consumers. For example, when you eat, when humans are born, they are small kids. Then they eat over their lifetime and become bigger and bigger, grow in mass and size, right? So there is a production that's happening at secondary level as well. You understand, everyone?
I did not understand.
So primary production is where a plant takes sunlight, CO2, water, do photosynthesis and makes its food, and that helps in the growth of the plant.
Yes, sir.
You sow a seed, a new seedling comes out, starts doing photosynthesis and starts growing. So we think that when we are giving water to the plants, we are actually helping them grow, which is correct. We are helping them grow in a manner, we are giving them raw materials, rest they are doing themselves. So they are growing due to primary production, correct?
Yes.
But we are growing due to secondary production. So we don't produce in our cells, we just consume. So the plant which produced used a fraction of it for itself and grew. Rest it stored in its stem, leaves, branches as starch. Then a baby deer, the baby of a deer will come, eat those grasses or the plants and grow in size, right? So inside
Yes.
its body, there is a secondary production happening, right?
Yeah.
Growth in biomass. But that is not dependent on photosynthesis. That is dependent on just the metabolism, respiration. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's called secondary production. So write down. Secondary production is defined as the rate of formation. Secondary production is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by consumers. So a question which has been asked from this topic is, the secondary production depends on which of the following? NPP, GPP, both, none.
NPP.
Exactly. Secondary production only depends on NPP because only NPP is available for the consumptions by the heterotrophs. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And primary production depends on NPP, GPP, both or none.
GPP.
None. Primary production is GPP. Primary production only depends on sunlight, water,
Yes.
and CO2. So that's the trick question. Primary production is GPP only, no? The full production
Yes,
is
sir.
GPP. You minus the respiratory losses by the plants, by the autotrophs, then it becomes NPP. Now that NPP is available for the heterotrophs. We don't depend on sunlight, water, or CO2. We only depend on the starch which is produced by the autotrophs. Do you understand this?
Yes,
People?
sir.
Everyone is clear with this concept? So secondary production depends on NPP, but primary production, which itself is GPP and NPP, it depends on sunlight. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great. So let's stop here for today. I also need some, I need to stop. Okay. So we are out of time also. And the next class we will start. So this part is clear to you. So we'll pick from here and we can finish a major chunk of the concepts in next class. As you have told that you have done pyramids, so please just go through the pyramids. I'm sure that you have done pyramids of number, biomass, and energy all. Have you done the pyramids for number in the trophic level, mass in the trophic level, and energy?
So we mainly discuss like pyramids and number.
Pyramids of number. That's it. Okay, cool.
We
So
did energy also.
Yeah,
energy,
energy
number
as
and
well, yeah.
energy, like biomass and energy you did, right? Okay, cool. So you have not started with succession, ecological succession and nutrient cycling, right?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. So we'll do that in the next class. Okay. Just revise whatever you have done today and yesterday. And then we'll talk about pyramids, all kind of pyramids, and also see